And so, without further ado, I would like to um, introduce Emily Mayo. So, we're in your hands now, Emily. That's what they would say at my church.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. That was one of the things that Nick and I really wanted to do, was to go to a church down there, but we didn't get a chance to, and we weren't there on a Sunday, so that would have been really fun. But thank you. I did just hit the record button. I just wanted to touch base on that we are recording, but not the Q&A part. So it can be as vulnerable as you want in the Q&A part. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, well, thank you guys so much for joining. And that is my bio. I'm going to try and not to say as much as possible, but it's going to happen, I'm sure. So I guess I'll just start out how I normally start. Do I want to show my screen yet? Yeah. Well, so I grew up in, as it was kind of touched on in the bio, I grew up in post what I call post GM Flint, Michigan. I was born in 1990. It's funny having my dad here because he could describe this way better than me, because he was there and I wasn't. Well, I was there, but I wasn't. I was very young. But so yeah, what I would call post GM Flint, Michigan, and I mean, GM's still there, right? But I was born in 1990 in Flint, in the Flint area, in Flint, and I grew up there and went to school there, went to church there, and the church that I grew up in too it's a Pentecostal church. So what I mean by post GM was like after the kind of crash of, there's a better way of saying this, I know, of when GM wasn't, there was kind of the closing their industry down a little bit in Flint. So there's just kind of an influx of neighborhood plight a little bit. And yeah, I am having to, like, because I'm the host, I have to let people in. So I might pause every now and then to do that. But so here, I will just share my screen because I think that's gonna help me not be distracted here. So so the messaging I was getting from both my environment of the city I was living in and in my church, being a Pentecostal church, kind of with a wing of evangelism a little bit, the messaging that I was kind of getting quite a bit was this messaging of a renewal, both of an economical one, but also a spiritual one, in the midst of kind of chaos or destruction, or a destruction kind of happening. So that's kind of the message, the messaging I kind of grew up in and around. All the while I was very involved in ministry with my family, but then also in my church and my youth group, and it was very much focused on outreach and the individual and compassion for people, and that just really had an effect on me. I knew at a pretty young age that I wanted to be an artist. I thought I wanted to be an interior designer, and I tried that for a minute, and then I just realized pretty quickly that was not going to be it. I needed to be making the things. So I switched gears, and I just never looked back. I just was making artwork. So I left Flint, and I went and got my BFA in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I have been living here ever since. I started making a lot of large drawings that were figure based, and those were I think actually I have them on here. Those were focused on compassion for the individual. These were large scale drawings of elderly mentally handicapped people that I had a connection with through my father, who did a Sunday school program for a very long time. Most of these individuals are no longer with us, but that's kind of what I was doing in my undergrad, and it was doing really well, and I really loved to draw, and and it served a great purpose. A couple of years went by, and I go to grad school, and I'm still doing the same thing. And you can't really do that in grad school because people just kind of beat you down and won't let you do that anymore. And that's a good thing because, thank you. You really need to get to the reason of why you're making something. That is hopefully why, or one of the questions that you get asked somewhere along your journey as an artist. But especially in grad school, that tends to happen is they just kind of, I wouldn't say browbeat, but some programs do this question of really soul searching, right? Soul searching and getting to the reason of why you're making things. And I'm glad that that happened for me, because I ended up having to really come to terms with why am I making things. And it was actually at that point where I still hadn't figured out a way to cross over my faith with my work. I was doing it kind of in a way here. I was doing it with these. I just, my husband doesn't know that I'm sharing my screen. So don't read that. But I don't even know what it said. So, yeah, I hadn't yet figured out how to like blend those two worlds. In so many ways, like so many branches of who we are, like they don't blend over very well. Like right now I'm a new mom, and I'm trying to now figure out how does mom equal artist, because in my whole life that wasn't a thing, but it is. But even, growing up, I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I knew I loved the Lord very much. It wasn't just a thing that I was taught as a kid, but it was, the Lord really met me in many ways through my life in a very real way. So, I have, and I feel like that happens with a lot of artists, is you have your art and you have your faith, and it's really difficult to see how they merge without drawing pictures of Jesus. And how do we make those two things meet? And so in grad school, I say all that because that's kind of when I did a lot of exploring. This was like, okay, how do I do this? And I remember I had a moment with or without the Lord, I don't know, but I kind of went away, as I often did. And when I lived downtown Grand Rapids and I was single and just kind of living, independent, living on my own, I would just kind of go either somewhere, I don't know, the beach or the river in Grand Rapids, and I'd try and seek the Lord. And I wanted him to answer me in that moment. You need to do fill in the blank. Like he's supposed to just do what I'm asking him to do right away. And I remember asking him, like, well, what should I make? What am I supposed to make? Almost like I had a blank piece of paper and I wanted him to write it down. And there are not many times in my life where I've asked the Lord a question and I have felt no answer. And that was one of them. And his silence was very loud. And it wasn't for a very long time that I realized that he was answering my question by not answering it. Is that he wasn't interested in like dictating to me what I should make. And as a parent, I can see that as, my baby's still really young, but if he ever asked me like, well, what do you want me to do with my life? Like, I'm not interested in telling you what you should do with your life. I want you to do what you love to do, that being said, we do things all to the glory of God, but it left me in a wondering of like, well, then where do I go? What do I do? Right? Because I don't have a actual answer. I don't have a physical thing. I don't have a very what's the word I'm looking for? Like a a tactile answer from him. And I didn't just ask the one time, obviously, but what I ended up doing was I just thought, well, why don't I just go back into my life? And I just kind of go back into my history and reinvestigate, why am I making things? And literally go back to my roots of the neighborhoods that I grew up in. And I'm a trained drawing artist, so my original intent was to grab images to draw from, and I did do that. I think I have some of these over here, but excuse me. So I'm trying to do that, and I did do that, but and I really did enjoy these drawings. Some of these are graphite. Oh, these are the graphite ones. Sorry. The charcoal ones are on another page, and what I was interested in doing with these was kind of encapsulating the most destructed part, trying to find the beauty in the destruction in the rubble there, and trying to draw them in very delicate ways. And then with these ones, I was thinking about kind of getting a total view of the destruction. If these houses were a portrait, right? That's kind of what I was thinking about these, and these are kind of another story. But how I got these was I started with just taking images from the ground with these pieces, and then eventually I needed to get higher and higher. The way we got this image was really funny story, which we'll save for another day. But but then eventually, and my dad's a big part of this process, he was like, well, I mean, if you just had a drone, it'd be a lot easier. And I was like, light bulb. So I got a drone and just started taking these images. And so just kind of masking some areas, but then also kind of not drawing all of it, but kind of leaving some of it kind of activated in a way with this powdery thing. So I'm still thinking about renewal from destruction, right? Kind of hearkening back to a lot of what I kind of the messaging I got growing up. And but what I didn't expect to happen when I did revisit the neighborhoods, obviously a lot of the destruction was still there, and some of it was still going on, and a lot of the reasoning for that, and actually there's quite the affiliation I felt with shoot, what's the name of your neighborhood? I forget the name of it. It's a very interesting name.
Stop six.
Stop six.
Poly. Polytechnic.
Polytechnic, yeah.
Yes, Polytechnic Heights.
Polytechnic Heights, yeah. And there was just a very similar feeling there too. There's differences, but there were some burnt down houses actually, which I thought about getting some wood from. But yeah, I just didn't expect to see this amount of destruction, and the reasoning for a lot of it in Flint, at least, used to be arson related, people burning down abandoned houses. And it was actually cheaper for the city for a while to just let them burn down and then just kind of excavate later. But so I got a lot of source imagery, but what I didn't expect to happen was to fall in love with the material itself that I was confronted with, which was charcoal, right? And I've been drawing in charcoal for a long time, but now the charcoal was in a very vulnerable state, and it was not at all the same thing that I go and I buy off the store shelf. It was now just robust and beautiful and terrible, and it had a story. Each piece had its own story, and it had a very specific function that was necessary to a home, that then the entire thing went up in flames. And what's left after this burning, which you could think of as you can think of like burning in the sense of a cleansing way as well. That's another use for charcoal too. But what's left are these huge pieces that have these alligator, things happening, and they're just gorgeous. But they're left in this big pit of nothing and waiting for somebody to come throw it away. And so my first trip back, I didn't grab any of it because I didn't even think to. I was just grabbing images, but I just couldn't stop thinking about the wood. And I just thought, I have to go back and get some of it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I have to go get it. And now, several truckloads later, we've made quite a bit of things. So I started, and I don't think I have. Oh shoot! One of the things that happens, side story. One of the things that happens when you have a baby, I'm sure those who have had a baby can relate. You start something and something happens and you can't finish it and you forget about it, because then you have to go do something for the baby. So there's this new gallery here, and that was supposed to be the images from the Kinfolk House that I haven't got a chance to upload yet. That's what the new gallery is supposed to say, and it's supposed to have a title, which I haven't decided on yet. But anyways, sorry, that's what new gallery means. And I don't have the first one that I ever made, but this is the second one. So this, you can, if you look at it and think about it, you can kind of tell that I was originally a two-dimensional artist trying to do sculpture. It's very flat. It's interesting, right? Because it's large, but I didn't have any idea what I was doing in a three-dimensional. And actually, if you looked at it from the side, you'd be like, I'm not supposed to be looking at it this way, am I? Because it just didn't look right. But it's just an interesting transition as an artist. It's like, I'm two-dimensional, and then I'm like, oh, but now I make three-dimensional things. So it took me a while to get used to the space, used to three-dimensional. But so I started grabbing the wood, and I thought, I don't know anything about sculpture, but what I know is that what I want to do with these pieces is I want to make pieces, talking about the wood pieces that I'm grabbing. I want to make things, forms that make you have to stand in awe of this. I want these pieces to be important again. I want them to matter to you. Just like with those drawings that I just showed you of the people, I wanted those people to matter to other people. And I wanted I felt very much like these pieces, the charcoal that was discarded, that went through fire, literally. I wanted them to come together to make what I was calling reverent forms. This first one was what's the term? Not a plinth. It's forget the name of it.
Like an obelisk?
Yeah, like a tall vertical.
Like the Washington Monument, like an
Totem.
obelisk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a tall monument kind of thing. I was thinking of like a monument that you'd have to look up at. This was 12 feet tall. I can't remember. Does that sound right, Dad? 12 feet tall? I don't know. Oh, it says it right here. Yeah, 12 feet. So, and then I wanted to start thinking about different ways of balancing. Reason for that is was trying to give form to the concept of faith, if there's any way of doing that. And that is believing in what one cannot see. So I'm trying to bring this concept of looking at something that doesn't really make sense, but you're really interested in it, and things that you might not be able to give words to. And that's a futile effort, trying to give form to faith, but it's something that I just wanted to start trying to do. And I was just really interested in steel structures and trying to make things kind of unbelievably balance or stand in a way. And so this one balances on this little piece right here. What's really funny, is there a picture of it? Let's see. I don't think it's in that one. Okay, I think you can barely see it, but it's right here. It's this little tiny dot. And the same thing is happening to the piece in Kinfolk House right now. But this one was by accident. And what happened here was there was a hair, because I have long hair and it sheds everywhere. And there was a hair in the piece, and there was a little tiny charcoal piece that was hanging from it. And it was so high up that people couldn't see the hair. They just saw the little piece floating. And they were like, my favorite part is that little piece that's floating. I'm like, are you kidding me? I went through like all this engineering to build this thing, and the thing that you love the most. And this wasn't just one person. It was like 10 to 15 people found me, and they're like, I love this little thing that's floating. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, well, I mean, okay, it's cool. And then my husband was like, actually, I have something that might do that. My husband used to be a street magician, and he's got a ton of magician materials. And so I went looking through all of that, and then I did a bunch of trial and error. And I'll just skip to this one, where I really fell in love with the process. I shouldn't say fell in love with the process. I fell in love with the effect after the process. The process itself took a very long time to master, but and every time I've done this, I've had someone helping me, because this takes so long. But again, here I'm trying to give form to that kind of unbelievable thing, right? Kind of looking at something that doesn't make sense. And then also what this piece is representing too, this is tamach. Tamach is a Hebrew word for wonder. I use a lot of Hebrew and Greek words to title my work. But so what these actual pieces are the very last little vestige of like bigger things that went through this whole process. So it's all of these pieces, but just the tiniest little bit. So the most insignificant little thing that I was going to throw away. But then I just kind of raised it to this, to your eye level. And I just want to make it important to you. It's kind of a lot of what I'm doing here. I'm sure there's, there we go. Okay. So anyway, and so I started to incorporate this and the wood structure in later pieces. I think Cedric and Letitia remember this piece from the Grand Rapids Art Museum at Art Prize a couple of years ago. But so what's going on with this piece is that it's balancing on this little front step here. Everybody thought that I burnt some stairs and I brought it in. I'm like, oh, what's interesting about that? But that's what most people actually thought, unfortunately. But so this piece came apart in a ton of pieces, and I was like, I'm gonna make this sculpture again. And then it sat in a storage unit for several years. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that my work itself has to be recycled. Like these materials the whole nature of me making any of this stuff was about reusing, was about redeeming, it was about recycling these materials, not in the sense of recycling of the way we think of it, but of not making them permanent, that they're supposed to be reused over and over again. So I don't know why I was trying to solidify this one. I was like, no, this one's going to stay the way it is. And it was years later that I realized, like, no, actually it needs to be something else. It needs to be reborn again. So I ripped it all apart, went into that storage unit, and I just ripped everything apart. And then I actually shipped all of the wood to Vermont Studios Center and made one of the first pieces that's actually going through a space diagonally in any way. So I went very two-dimensional. The first one that I made that I didn't have a picture of was very, very two-dimensional, very small. The next one was still two-dimensional, but big. And then the third one started to reach out into the three-dimensional a little bit. And then I'm starting to work on diagonals and thinking about space more. So it took me a little bit of time to get there. And then I'm also here incorporating the little floating pieces too. I think you can see that. I think this was the only thing I did while I was there. I was only there for 2 weeks. No, I made some drawings too, but Vermont Studio Center is really awesome. Have you guys ever heard of Vermont Studio Center? Yeah. Cedric, have you been there?
No, I haven't been there, but I definitely have heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
And know a lot of people who have.
Yeah, they're really great. I want to go back someday. And again, or not again, but I'm also starting to have the pieces floating individually, which that process is pretty self-explanatory. It's just kind of a monofilament from the ceiling, but here I'm using that like floating process. But yeah. So yeah, I've just been kind of working with this material and kind of getting it to float or balance in some weird way. The mystery behind that is that there's just a steel armature inside that things are connected to and bolted into. If there's a pedestal, it's usually a false pedestal, and underneath of it is a structure. But this one, anastasis, Hebrew word for wonder, or Greek. Hebrew is the New Testament, right? Nope. Greek is the New Testament.
Yep.
Yes. Sorry. I knew that. So this one was really fun. This one I finished the day that COVID hit our area in 2020 and everything was shutting down. And they came and they were like, we're shutting the church down and we're not having service, which has actually never happened. I don't think it's ever happened since the church was started in like the early 1940s, or I don't know, 40s or 50s. I don't think they ever canceled service. And so they came and were like, we're canceling service this week. And then nobody saw the piece for 2 months, and it just sat in this atrium. And it was just like kind of interesting. It was like this thing that we've never done before in our church, and it just kind of sitting there in silence. People did eventually see it, but it was like only there for a day until I had to, or like one Sunday before I had to take it down. So this is the atrium of our church. So, and then I think I will show some images from this most recent install too at Kinfolk House. I just don't have them on the website yet, so sorry. I was doing it. So Existime, this was the next iteration of that floating piece. I had been wanting to do it again, but there's a ton of things that I didn't mention about that past install with the little floating thing. It took me 72 hours and I had to restart 3 times. One of them, I had to restart like an hour before I was supposed to open because the art handler put his hand through it. So this one, I was scarred from that experience. And so it literally, I think I didn't do it for like 3 or 4 years. And this one, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it again. But I had someone helping me and she did an amazing job helping. And yeah, so finally was able to remake the piece in a larger way. And this, I'm thinking about kind of an upward movement with it, but that's still that floating process. And then to home was the 2 flanking pieces on either side there. So I just kind of did a 2-in-1 kind of install where I had it coming out from the wall, the pieces coming out from the walls and meeting each other. So I started to think about the wood in a way of, I was making these sculptures that were very stagnant, that they had a presence, right? But I wanted to start to bring action to the wood. It was otherwise dead, right? But I wanted to start to activate it and make it kind of come alive again in a space. So I was still talking about its importance, but also wanted to have kind of a commanding presence. But and then just to be as thorough as possible. Oh, these are pictures of my baby that I'm going to draw. And then this is a new Lightroom, so it's hard for me. Sorry. Okay. We'll just scroll through. Oh, this is I think she was holding him for a minute here. There we go. What's her name again?
Rayma.
Rayma. Rayma loved Samuel. That's my baby boy. That's Letitia and Cedric's baby girl. I mean, she's not a baby anymore, but she's their baby.
Oh, she's still a baby.
Oh, she's still a baby. Okay, so I did have them picked up. But okay. So this is kind of an interesting shot from behind the piece. And then this is Kinfolk House. It's an amazing space in there. If you've never been there, it's Cedric's grandmother's house, right? Yeah. Grandmother, yeah. That was renovated to be a gallery, but a lot of the house, they maintained the shiplap walls, and it's just a lot. You can just feel the history when you walk through the space, and then you kind of go through the space, and then at the end there's this big white space. It's like bam. And then I was able to actually install in the floor, which I have never been allowed to do. And yeah, I remember like seeing pictures of the space and I was like, is that a wooden floor? Like a plywood floor? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, Cedric, can I screw into your floor? And they were like, yeah. I was like, no way. So yeah, so I took advantage of that opportunity, because I don't know if I'll ever get that opportunity again where someone's going to let me do it in the floor, but like right out of the floor. I can make like a pedestal and do it out of a pedestal, but out of the floor without building a false floor. But I don't really want to do that. But so that was, yeah, just an incredible opportunity that I'm really happy about and really excited about. And yeah, the crate is its own chapter. But I ended up having to make the piece in I had to turn it around very short amount of time. But I was really happy with it. Hi, sorry. Let's see here. So, and then these are those confessional doors that they have installed on one side of the room there. Oops. Oops. But yeah, I was really excited about this piece because what I was thinking about for this work was just giving it even more of a commanding presence. Was there a way that I can intersect the space in a way that I haven't done before? But again, that just demands your attention. And I did like install, oh no, that's not in the picture, but there is a little tiny floating piece there that I installed at the very last second before I left. Kind of demoing the Cedric how the process works, but I do just kind of want to recap about just kind of a little bit of some of the research that I've done around this topic of intersecting or creating within the context of your faith. And I forgot my book out there, and I forgot multiple books, but I will mention a couple of them if you're wanting to write some down. I think it's raining here. But Walking on Water by Madeleine L'Engle is a good one. And that's an older one. I'm in the middle of reading Mind of the Maker by Dorothy Sayre. Any of you ever read that one? That one's a little bit more like, that one's pretty old. Like she was a peer of C.S. Lewis. Dorothy Sayre was. And then a very new one. It's written, I think, like 2 years ago by John Mark Comer is Garden City. That one's less about like strictly about art making, but he does spend quite a bit of time on that like creative process. But a lot of the research that I've done around this all kind of harkens back to our mandate as humans, going back to Genesis 1 and the language around how and why humans were made and what they were made to do. So we were made in the image of a creative God, right? We were made in the image of a creator. Inherently, it's in our DNA to make things. That's how we're designed. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick so that I can can I focus if I do that? Yeah, I think I can. But and it's part of our design. Sorry, I have some notes and I'm pulling it. So, but what does that mean? Does that mean that we create things that we're kind of told to make? And I think that's, I know like that's what I thought I was supposed to do. Even if I didn't ever put words around that, I really did think in some part of me that in order to do things to the glory of God, it meant that I needed a set of instructions and I needed him to tell me exactly what that was going to be. And I was going to do it really well. You just need to tell me what to do and I'm going to do it really well. And in some ways that might happen of like that you need to make a decision. And sometimes there is a clear yes or no that God will give you peace about or not peace about. But in the way of making things, I was kind of taking the easy way out. And another one of the words around like our mandate as humans is that the word image there is the word selem, S-E-L-E-M in Hebrew, which is idol or statue. So we are image bearers of God. What do idols and statues actually do? They stand as representatives of something else. They're making something visible that is invisible at the moment. So another way to think about it is that one of the things that I feel that we're mandated to do or created to do is make the invisible God visible through what we do, through how we love, through our words and our deeds. But just make these invisible things visible. And that's a lot of what I'm dealing with in my work too. And I know I'm kind of getting a little deep with my notes here and the words, but those are just some thoughts that I have on this. I don't have a equation to plug in, but what I do know is that God calls us to create and do all things to his glory and the best that we possibly can. And it's not about a lot of the work that we're trying to work against as Christian artists is to undo a lot of this, just thinking that to be a Christian artist is to illustrate the biblical stories. And I just feel like, if you think you can do that better than Rembrandt, then you go right ahead. You knock yourself out. But he did a pretty good job. And, I think we're I just love that. I know I'm kind of like jumping all over the place. I do have thoughts, but one of the things that I just think is so interesting about how God created us is that he created us with the ability to create, which he didn't need to do, right? But he entrusted us with that ability. And if we're looking to him for inspiration, which I highly recommend in this area, is to think about the ways that he created and did things. But essentially, like when he created, and if we're made in the image of God, and we're his image bearers, and then as creatives, we're supposed to make as image bearers, there's a couple ways we could implement that. But one thing to know, obviously, we cannot create things out of nothing. That's the one thing that we can't do. There's actually a word for that. Forget the word. But there's a specific word in the Bible that's only used for when God's creating something, because he's speaking something into existence. And we as humans, we cannot create that way. We can't make anything out of nothing. But what we can do, and what we do is we repurpose materials and we remake things. And I think that's exactly what he wanted us to do. It's in the mandate of subdue the earth, right? That's in that mandate, is to take these raw materials that I've given you, and it actually lists a lot of raw materials in Eden. And it's about taking those raw materials and making beautiful things out of them, not, whatever beautiful means, but and then the other way you could apply that is, again, with this mindset of you're created in the image of a creative God and looking to him for inspiration. Well, what are the kinds of things that God does, or that he did through Jesus in the human form? He redeemed things, right? I don't know. There's just a million ways you can think about that. He loved on people. He he took broken things and made them beautiful again, or that's a lot of what we're doing as artists. I think just in the nature of working in that way, we are working in our creative mandate as humans. I'd love to answer any questions about that. That probably would bring about some interesting conversation.
Oh, thanks, Emily. And you already know how much I love your work. I think it's amazing. And, looking at your path and hearing you talk about the work has been wonderful. I feel like I've gone really deep into Emily's brain and process. I think a moment that stuck out to me, with you talking about faith and creation and, being made as a creator, is that piece you did that had the first floating charcoal ball in it. And it was because you said your hair got caught in the piece and the charcoal was in it. It just made me think about how often, we're working on something and then something we weren't expecting, like we think we're so in control of the piece and we've decided, okay, it's going to be like this and we're going to lay it out this way and it's going to go like this. And then something happens that you didn't think of, you didn't expect, but it just works. It's like a sort of collaboration with you and another creative being, possibly.
Yeah.
And then that gets picked up and you continue to use it in new ways and expand upon it. It was like a gift given to you. And you could have said, oh, my hair, and ripped it out and threw it away. But it stayed there and it led to something else. And so I wanted to comment on that. And then I did have a question about the pieces that you're using, and they come from the neighborhood. You're sourcing the wood from the neighborhood. Have you ever created a piece with wood from one particular house? Or are the pieces always mixed from several different houses? Because when you think about faith and the idea of temple and this body as a temple, and you're using these houses in a way that's almost personified when you put these pieces together, talking about rebirth and all this kind of stuff. Have you ever thought to look at like one house and the life that was there and what that could be interpreted into in an art piece?
No, I haven't ever done one individual house, but I definitely could do that. What happened, but the nature of like sourcing the wood was that I was just trying to get enough and I was trying to do it quickly as to not raise suspicion.
Right.
So it just it kind of like gets all mixed in, but there have been some sites where there was just plenty that I could probably have done like one piece with that.
Right.
And I hope that I'm able to do this someday, where we almost made the piece from Fort Worth, because the crate, we weren't sure if it was going to come. And I was going to dinner and I drove by a house that was like, oh, there's my wood. And I was like, we could just make it from this. And I honestly, we were going to do it, but I was like, oof, like we were already cutting it close. And that is a whole day, is like sourcing and building like armature. And we didn't have enough time in the timeline, but I would love to source material from specific places and make that. I think that would be great. It's such a risky thing though.
It's almost like coming full circle to your drawings. When you were drawing the individuals,
right.
It was about that person, that person's personality and your representation of them. And that, that's what I could see with the houses as well, because they have their own sort of personalities and their own histories, and as a structure, as a space, as
Yeah, and I do think of those as portraits, those drawings. They're just, kind of figurative pieces. It's kind of what I think of them as. But yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thought about the hair. Yeah, that it was like a little gift actually, and not a mistake. But yeah, I like that.
Could you speak, Emily, a little bit about the role of intuition in your work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, I definitely do this a lot more with the installs and the sculptures than I do with my drawings. And the drawings that I make are very much a way of me studying something or wanting to spend time with something to know, give importance to in that way. But when I work sculpturally, I have no constructs around that, which freed me to, in many ways, just freed me to kind of just play a lot. But and then I do plan the pieces out a little bit, because the armature I typically have pre-made, but that's all I have when I get into a space is the pre-made armature that I then bolt, and then the rest of it is like, it's like a whole puzzle that has no picture that you're looking at. It's just all the pieces are strewn about a room, making a mess. And yeah, I have to intuitively look at the piece all like over and over and over again. And I have to assess each little spot and say, okay, what piece is going to fit that perfectly in that moment? Or do I need to take this off and redo it? But yeah, a lot of that process is intuitively based. Intuition is something that I've had to really work on over the years. I think that's something like, I'm a Enneagram 1. That means anything to anybody, but it means I'm a perfectionist, and I have to have things planned out to a T. I am an organizer and a planner, but in this case, when I think I built the piece in 13 hours, I think, or less. I don't know. I don't remember. Brian knows exactly how much time I spent on it.
13.
13. Yeah. Did I work on it for 13? I didn't. Or was it I had to build it from 13 hours after that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did sleep. And then my baby was with me, and I was feeding him too. And so it was fun. But but when you have like a short turnaround time like that, which I wasn't actually worried about, because I've done these enough to where I could just trust that I could do it. That, again, not to use the same word over and over again, but just trust my intuition, and it worked out.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So during that 13 hours that I don't think I was there for 13, but the time that I was there, I saw how at peace you were when creating. And coming out of undergrad, a lot of me and my friends are never at peace when we're making pieces for class. We're stressing. A lot of us has done things last minute. We're trying to make something that the professor is going to love. And just being able to see you in peace and have fun was refreshing. And my question is, has learning to trust God and growing in your trust in him, has that helped you loosen the amount of control that you have in your work? And you probably kind of already spoke to this, but I still wanted to ask my question.
Oh, yeah, I love that. That's such a good question. And I really appreciate that observation. I think it looked like I was at peace. No, I was. And I do just want to thank you so much for all of the work that you did. I put Brian to work. You got real dirty. You should see the space when we're building these pieces. It's just a complete mess. It wasn't white for a long time. But yeah, I just really appreciate all your work, Brian. And that's a beautiful question. Gosh. Trusting God. I can't say I've mastered that one by any means. Gosh, there's so many things in my life that I still just want to hold the reins on. There's a lot of times where I've needed to make a decision and I knew what the right decision was. Just like the Israelites, and I'm going through Numbers with the Bible Project. Just like the Israelites, they knew from the Lord what was their promise. Just do the things that He asked you to do, and they still were like, "Oh, but this looks better." And that's I've done that so many times. So to answer your question, what I've learned in those moments is I've gotten better at listening to the Holy Spirit and what He has to, or like the direction there. I think a lot of that peace comes from, it is trusting, not myself, but yeah. Because you wording this question actually reminds me of a moment that I had with the Lord. There's no way I can tell all the stories in this one talk, but there was a moment when I was building Kafar, the stair piece from the art museum, that there was so many moving pieces with that piece. I had to somehow engineer the base so that it would counterbalance the rest of it. And I had to figure out this mathematical equation, which I'm not an engineer. And then I had to figure out a way to weigh the things. That's a funny story, but I had to figure out a way the whole rest of the sculpture to know how much counterbalance I had to have on the other side. But anyway, I had this very short turnaround time, and the curator wanted several new drawings for me, and I had to do it all in a month. I wasn't sleeping well. This is way before a child, but I wasn't sleeping well at all. I wasn't sleeping actually for days because I was just so stressed, and my brain wouldn't shut off. And I feel like that happens a lot of times if we get answers in the middle of the night. I know that happens for a lot of art friends that I have, a lot of artist friends. It's like, oh, I got this when I was trying to go to bed. And, so there's a thing to that, but I wasn't sleeping for days, and I was taking a lot of stress on trying to figure out how I was going to get all this done. I had all every day planned out because again, I'm a planner, and way too much stress. And I was trying to sleep for the third or fourth night in a row. I just wasn't sleeping, and I would just get up and I would draw and I would plan because I couldn't work on things. So I just get up but I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, and I may have said this out loud, or at least I prayed it very loudly in my head. But I said, well, God, I cannot do this. I can't do it. Because in my mind, I'm going through all the things I need to do. There isn't enough time, and I cannot do it. And I heard very clearly from him, that's right, you can't. I need to do it. I need to do it with you. And I wasn't trusting him that everything was going to be okay, that he, brought about all the pieces that came together for me to have the opportunity that I had, and that he was going to see me through it. I was taking it all on myself. And that was one of the first times that I did start trusting him. And it was immediately after that moment that I did fall asleep. I just felt the weight fall off. And I was able to make the thing. Yeah. It went really well. But that was in 2017. And so that was one of the first times that I did have to like let go. And I feel like I've been working in that ever since, with multiple other pieces and things. And yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. I haven't thought about that moment in a long time, but that was a very different Emily that you saw in that room than made that first piece. Because I think I would have like lost it. Another thing too is like, I know my brain is like thinking about like motherhood, because I'm still trying to grapple with that, but like babies just kind of put things into perspective of like what's really important in life. And my work and my practice is really important, but I don't know, I had just like given birth to a human, and it was like totally earth-shattering, like different creation altogether. It's like that's actually the most important thing that I will have ever partaken in creating, is that person that I'm going to try not to mess up. But yeah, anyway, that was a very long answer.
I have a question.
Hi.
Well, I think someone asked a question in the chat, so I'll go after you address that one.
Okay. It says, so Robert says, in relation to the practice of building religious structures over pre-existing religious sites or reliquaries that enable a spiritual object to be moved from place to place, does your work hold any of the place of memory of the event that provides your material for making? Interesting. The practice of building religious structures over pre-existing religious sites. Enable a spiritual object. Yeah, I have thought about it in that way of like, these pieces are, I don't like to use too churchy of words, but they like they do hold a presence. I feel like they do represent that place in many ways, and that's why I try to keep each of the pieces that I'm repurposing, I try and keep them as intact as possible. I try and leave hinges and nails and all these things, because I really feel like it is a record of where it came. So if I'm wanting to create importance with it, it is important to me, to begin with. So I do treat them like with like this kind of holy mindset, right? Which I think is kind of what you're touching on there. So I do think that there is some similarities in that practice there with how I'm thinking about the material, for sure. What was your name again? Sorry, the one that was going to ask a question.
Julia.
Yeah, sorry. I'm on my phone, so I'm like a little slow to react. Yeah, so I was just wondering, like, so seeing your pieces and they come from these burned homes and things like that in this neighborhood, and it's this rebirth of utilizing these materials. And I think oftentimes in neighborhoods, they just kind of stay like that. have you ever revisited and seen the rebirth of the location that you sourced your materials from? Has it turned into something new, or has it just stayed like a burned down lot, or like, you know, anything like that? Have they developed from where you've sourced your pieces?
Yeah, I have seen some of them, and most of them are just what I've seen. They're just green lots. So they kind of fill it in with some dirt and they plant some grass, and then next year is grass. And then I don't know if my dad's still here, but he probably could speak to it a little bit more if there's anything built on top of other things. But
I haven't seen anything built on them, but like you said, a lot of them, they've cleaned up the sites and made them grass. Sorry, I had to stand up. My legs were cramped.
oh yeah.
That's why my video was off. But yeah, they have cleaned a lot of them up. It was amazing how many years some of them stayed in the condition they were, that we could actually go back to sites and get more wood.
Yeah, that's right.
Then they did start cleaning them up. But no, I haven't seen anything built on them that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I do want to say hi to Anne. Anne is my chair at Hope College. I don't know if she's there or not, but thank you for joining.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
I was just trying to type, but it's hard to type on the phone.
Yeah.
When you just these last couple of questions about the burnt houses and the urban renewal aspect of it, I was sort of thinking along those lines for a question too. But then as I was typing, I wondered, the photos you have of the burnt houses, they're so beautiful, or the wood is so beautiful. I think that's both a testament to your sculpture and your photography skills, because you could really see. But I wondered, your drawing is your major medium. I'm wondering if you could take that soot and turn that into ink, because I think ink in the old days is made out of the soot from candlelight. And this is wood, so it's different, but I just wondered if there was another way of using some of that burnt material.
Yeah.
If that pulverized and suspended somehow so that it could become an ink.
Yeah. I love that idea. I have not ever thought of that. I get the question all the time is if I draw with the charcoal, and I have tried that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have any binding medium in it, like the charcoal that you buy off the shelf. And then also, like, you can make your own willow with vine by burning vine, but that's not what this material is. It's all building material that's been processed and treated and then burnt, and then it won't stick on the page. So anyway, if anybody was wondering that, I know there were some thoughts about that. I do get that question all the time. And I have tried it, but it just doesn't work. But I did not even know that was a thing, to make ink out of,
Yeah, I'm not sure how, you'd have to investigate those, but it's called lamp black.
Oh, okay.
From the lamps that burn. Now, again, it's a different material, but I think the idea is you grind it into this very, very fine powder, and then you have some kind of a binding agent. But it's just an interesting another way of using that really beautiful material. I mean, it's scrap lumber that's burnt, but the way you've presented it in the gallery and the way you photographed it, it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, black. Lamp black. I guess I could always just ask you in person. That's fine. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. Yeah. Any other questions at all? Well, this has been.
You could tell them about how you took those first pictures.
Oh.
That is a good story.
Dad loves that story. It's a really hard to describe. I was trying to get images higher and higher of these houses, and this one house that I really wanted to, because I wanted to see the top of it, because I knew it was all burnt up down there, and I wanted to see inside. well, this house was like a 3-story house, and all we had was our phones. So my husband had a phone mount for the phone, and I don't remember who came up with this idea, and I don't know why we all jumped on board. Dad did, okay. Of putting, what was it, 30 feet of PVC pipe together? Something like that.
You
And
connect 3 joints of PVC and then your pole on top of that. And then it took like 3 of us to balance it, and we put it on video and raise it up and try and keep it up there high enough. And we got some funny pictures of it going up.
oh
and
my
coming
gosh.
down.
Is that like a Flintstones version of a drone?
Well, yeah, we didn't have a drone, and like I didn't even think about that. So what we ended up doing was that we pivoted it off of Dad's truck, off of the tire on his truck. So we butted it up against that, and then all 3 of us pulled it up with like wire and string, and I just took a video of it as it was going up and down, and then that's how I just freeze framed that.
It was like a 35-foot selfie stick. I kept thinking this has got to look like something out of a slapstick comedy if anybody's watching us do this. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, it was the things you do.
It got the job done. So
yeah, the things you do. And then just this is a testament to my parents and like how amazing they are. Like I have a crazy idea, and then they're like, how can we get that to work? So, but yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for your time and your questions, and thank you so much to Kinfolk House and Letitia and Cedric for this opportunity. Thank you, Letitia, for remembering my work and reaching out to me.
it's unforgettable.
Oh, thank you.
Unforgettable. So thank you for saying yes.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome.